Paris is a dream destination, but it can sometimes feel overwhelming if you are not prepared for it. So in this video, I will share with you the best secrets and the best way to enjoy the city and to prepare for your trip. My name is Walid. I was born and raised in Paris and I've been working as a licensed guide for the past 10 years. So people have asked me tons of questions about the city and we've compiled them in this video. So stay until the end because I will share with you a few secrets about French culture that most people don't know about. To answer this question, we have to take into account the high and the low season for tourism in Paris. The high season starts around Easter time and ends in late October. And after that is the beginning of the low season, with an exception for Christmas, which is always busy. So our recommendation in the Dayin team is to come to Paris around September or March because you don't have the crowds of the summer and yet you have still a very nice weather. In Paris, we do have 4 seasons. The summer expect to have really warm weather and the winter really cold and rainy. So take that into account when you book your activities. Now that we've said that, when is the best time to come to Paris? Well, we have to think, how long should you stay? Our opinion is that you should stay at least 4 full days in Paris. I know that sometimes people recommend 3 days, 2 days, but that's not enough to really enjoy the city. Don't make the mistakes that we see over and over again of just packing your days full of activities and at the end not being able to enjoy it very much. You know, museum fatigue is a real thing, so take time, take 4 full days. If you are on a low budget and you can't afford to stay that long, 2 days is the strict minimum we recommend. And if you are planning to do day trips outside of Paris, like in the Champagne region or in Normandy, take 1 week. And this way you'll be able to really enjoy Paris. What you have to take into account before booking your flight is that you will be tired. So what we recommend our guests is to sleep on the plane and arrive in Paris in the morning. That's the ideal situation, but we know that not everybody can sleep on the plane. So the alternative, arrive midday, do something quiet in the afternoon like a river cruise or some shopping. Make sure that if you arrive quite late, that your accommodation is ready for you. And then the next day you start over and you are fresh and ready. In Paris, you can pay for mostly anything with a credit card. That's not a problem. The only issue you might have is with the brand American Express because they have higher fees, so a lot of businesses refuse to accept it. So ask beforehand and make sure that you have an alternative. Now, when it comes to cash is not always necessary in Paris, but if you want to have some, well, you can withdraw from ATMs, avoid at all costs Euronate worldwide because they have really high fees, but go to local banks and if you withdraw money, it's quite cheap. Finally, we recommend for people to take a travel insurance. That's quite important in case something happens, but check with your credit card company, maybe it's already built in what you pay. And for your passport, make sure that your passport is valid for at least 3 months after your trip, because we've seen people being refused to board the plane because of that. Now let's talk about prices. How expensive is Paris? Well, I've been able to travel around the world and I can tell you that Paris is not as expensive as New York or San Francisco or London, but it is one of the most expensive cities in the world. For food, count around 35 euros if you want to have a meal with a drink and a dessert. If you want to buy yourself a latte in a coffee shop, that will be on average around 5 euros. A croissant is 1,20 euro. So that gives you a kind of an idea. You can expect to spend between 100 and 150 euros per day, realistically, so that takes into account stopping to buy a little gift, buying a dessert in a nice place. And so that's without accommodation and activities. Talking about accommodation, what are the best places to stay in Paris? Well, Paris is divided into 20 districts that we call les arrondissements, and we recommend you to stay between the arrondissement 1 to 9th, because these are central, you can walk around and you don't commute too much. If you are with a family, stay rather on the left bank, the 5th and the 6th, but otherwise any will do. Now, the two-digit arrondissement, they are nice, but just a little further away. And what we don't recommend at all are the suburbs. And if there's an area to avoid inside Paris, it's Gare du Nord and La Chapelle, which are not really unsafe. We will talk about safety in our next question, but they are known to be more rowdy, unclean, so stay rather in the center. Paris is one of the most visited cities in the world with about 35 million visitors a year. It hosts international events, diplomatic missions, so of course Paris is safe. But not only it is safe, but the data backs it up because you have very little violent crime. Most of the crime we have is small issues like pickpocketing or scams, and that's what you should be wary of as a tourist. But it's like any big city, and if you are used to big city, you shouldn't have a problem. So make sure you know where your phone is, check where your bag is in restaurant, and that's it. You don't have to worry about anything. So Paris is a no-brainer in terms of safety. It is safe, don't worry about it. Now, to talk about something nicer, what should you consider between a hotel and an Airbnb? Well, for hotel, we know that it's quite easy. You can check in and you have all the facilities available to you. You have a concierge that can help you. And for Airbnbs, well, you can enjoy some of the local life. You can have a kitchen if you want to cook. However, there's something that you should be aware of when it comes to Airbnb. The city has tightened its rules when it comes to short-term rental, and so some hosts tend to cancel on you because they've already filled up the days that they were allowed to rent it to you. So make sure to get a written confirmation, especially if you book many months in advance, that they won't cancel on you. There's three things to consider before booking your accommodation that are really important. The first one is which floor is it on, because in a lot of old buildings you don't have elevators. So make sure that you don't have any mobility issues, that you're fine with going to the top floor. The second thing is AC. I know that in a lot of culture AC is widely available, but in Paris we don't need it that much, and when we have heat waves we use fans. So make sure that there's AC if you need it. And the last thing is the size of the apartment. On average, an apartment in Paris is about 45 square meters, which is quite small for other people. So make sure that the bedroom you are booking or the apartment you are booking is the proper size. When it comes to packing, make sure that you bring with you comfortable clothes and especially comfortable shoes. Nobody will judge you on what you wear. You will look like a tourist anyway, so it's okay. Make sure that you're willing to walk a lot and to enjoy the most of the city. Another advice would be to leave some empty space in your luggage, so this way you won't regret overstuffing and not being able to bring back anything home. I see countless people that have to ship things over, and it's much more costly than packing light. Finally, for medicine, bring your own supply and a doctor's note, because a lot of the drug that can be sold at home over the counter requires here in France a doctor's prescription. Unfortunately, the days where you could enter a museum without a reservation are long gone. So now you need to book things ahead, and typically Eiffel Tower and Sainte-Chapelle, I would say about 2 months ahead, Louvre and Versailles about a month, Orsay and cruises about 2 weeks. So given these estimations, make sure that you look at availabilities before your trip and know that there are hot periods where there's very little availability, such as Easter, June, around Halloween and Christmas. To plan your stay in Paris, we usually recommend to book one monument or museum a day. It can be in the morning or in the afternoon, and then the other half of the day, you can do a neighborhood tour. And you can match them together. Typically, if you do Saint-Germain neighborhood, it's close to the Museum of the Army where you have Napoleon's tomb, and that works really well together. The second thing to take into consideration is when museums are closed. Typically, Versailles is closed on Monday and the Louvre is closed on Tuesdays, and that will help you to organize your days. And the reason I'm able to tell you all of this, it's because we are a tour company based in Paris. We've been organizing tours for thousands of people, and if you are interested in joining a tour, go in the link in the description and book a tour with the code Dayin10. You will have 10% off on all of our tours. Alright, now that you've booked everything, you're ready to discover Paris. And first, let me reassure you about something. Paris is not that big. Fun fact, it's actually the same size as San Francisco, Boston, and Barcelona. It's 10 kilometers wide and 11 kilometers from north to south. The only thing about Paris is that it's very dense. It has one of the highest density of population in the world, with about 2.1 million people living in such small space. So what does it mean in terms of transportation? Well, let me show you. Paris Metro dates back to the 1900s. It's the second oldest in the world, and because of that, it's also one of the densest. So typically you can cross Paris in less than 30 minutes with the metro. It's quite convenient. The only issue is that there's a lot of stairs. If you were to buy a metro ticket, it would cost you €2.55 at the moment. And if you do 1 or 2 journeys a day, that's okay, you can just buy them individually. If you intend to do many more journeys in a day, we recommend to take a pass, a daily pass called Navigo Day. Should you use taxis or Uber in Paris? Well, Uber works really well. The only problem is that because taxis are a powerful lobby in France, they are allowed to drive on bus lanes and in some restricted areas where Uber can't. And in some cases, taxis, the problem is that they can be dishonest. I mean, I've heard horror stories of people being overcharged. So the best of both worlds would be to use taxis through the Uber app. But honestly, one of the best ways to discover Paris is actually by walking. Paris is one of the most walkable cities on earth because it has a high density of population and a high density of shops. Typically, you have about 30 to 35 shops per inhabitant in Paris, so it doesn't feel empty or boring if you walk around. The sidewalks are safe and you have plenty of space. The only thing is, if you have a disability, it might be difficult, and that's our next question. Unfortunately, Paris' biggest weakness is accessibility. The metro is not very accessible, there's very few elevators available, and the streets, well, sometimes the sidewalks are very narrow and you have a lot of cobblestone. So if you are in a wheelchair, what we do recommend is either taking the bus, because buses are accessible, or specialized taxis or ride-hailing services such as Cao Cao. Now for a very practical point, what about restroom in Paris? Well, you have to know that in France, it's not very proper to enter a business and use the restroom without buying something. So my technique personally is ask for a coffee to go, and then I ask them if it's okay to use the restroom. And usually there's no problem. But you can also go to department stores such as Galeries Lafayette or Le Bon Marché, where they have restroom available for everybody. You do have public restrooms that the city has placed around, but honestly, they're not great. They do clean themselves, but it makes for a long waiting time, and some are not as clean as others. As a guide, how do I choose restaurants? Well, I go on Google Maps and I look at the reviews, and if I see more than 4.2 stars, then I know that it should be a good restaurant. What I try to avoid is restaurants that have menus that are too long, too many items, and that are translated into too many languages. I also try to avoid restaurants that are close to monuments such as the Eiffel Tower or the Louvre, because sometimes those are not that good. So if you stick to this advice, you should be able to find great restaurants. Once you are at a restaurant, the mistake that I commonly see is that people want to drink water and they ask for water, and the waiter will bring a bottle like this one. And usually they will charge you €10 for such bottle. But you have to know that tap water in France is of good quality, it's perfectly safe to drink, it's typically what I drink at home, and it's always free by law in the restaurant. When it comes to gastronomy, France has a lot to offer. And I invite you, because now you know how to pick a good restaurant, to go beyond the basic choices. Because if you are in a good restaurant, no matter what you will try, it will be good and it will be different. Typically, instead of taking a steak and fries that you can find pretty much anywhere, try something different like duck confit or bœuf bourguignon. One of my preferred specialty is the poire aux vinaigrettes, so it's leeks that are cooked and then served lukewarm with a vinaigrette sauce on top of it, and I seldom see it mentioned or referenced in guides or like videos about Paris. So I really invite you to take risk and to try it. If you are vegetarian, it's much easier today in Paris to find options than it was 10 years ago, for instance. So you have specialized restaurants such as Maslow in the first district that does great vegetarian food. You also have usually 1 or 2 veggie options in restaurants. But if you have allergies, it gets more difficult because French people don't really have nut allergies. I think it's more of an Anglo-Saxon thing. And so it's better if you could write things down in French and show them to a waiter to tell them how important it is, and especially if you have celiac disease. When it comes to tipping, France has a different approach than other countries. Like typically, I know that in the US you have to tip, it's mandatory. In France, it's not the case. But it doesn't mean that people don't like when you tip. They appreciate it, and so you do it as a gesture of gratitude. Typically here, I just had a coffee, and the waiter was nice enough to allow us to film, and so I'm going to leave him 2 euros. Alors, how to be respectful of local etiquette and of the French culture? Well, French people, I always say, are triggered by 2 things: noise and politeness. Noise because we don't like loud noises and we don't like when people talk too loud, especially in public places such as the street, trains, museums, so be mindful of that and try to respect others. The second thing, politeness, it sounds basic, but it's not universal. We don't have the same rules of politeness. And typically in France, when in some settings such as entering the store, walking in a building and meeting somebody, you have to greet them with a bonjour. That's very important. And I think this is where the reputation of French people being rude comes from. They were met with what sounded to them like rudeness and they became rude themselves. But as long as you smile and you say bonjour, merci, au revoir, you should have no problem. Finally, let me tell you about the French mindset. In France, we don't live to work, we work to live. And that means that we accept that there's a human factor everywhere, that people can be grumpy, they can have a bad day, and that's okay. And that's perhaps why our customer service perhaps is not top-notch, it's not always the best, but we accept that. The second thing is that French people have a confrontational culture. They don't mind debating, they don't mind sharing their ideas, and they don't mind saying when they're upset. I like to compare it to the Anglo-Saxon culture. I would say that French people are like coconuts. You know, they can be hard on the outside but soft inside, and once you get to know them, they are your friends for life. Whereas in the Anglo-Saxon culture, you have the peach culture, where it's soft on the outside, everybody's friendly, everybody's nice, but sometimes it can be insincere and you don't really know how to get to the core, which is usually hard to get to. So if you know these differences and understand what the French culture is about, you will be able to appreciate more French people. Now you have all the information to plan for your perfect trip to Paris. I've tried to answer a lot of questions, but I might have forgotten some, so leave them in the comments and tell us if you want a part 2. Like and subscribe for more content about Paris.